Welcome back to the Sleepy Poker Masterclass, Beginner to Master. In this 19th lesson, we study how professionals make clear decisions with incomplete information. Every hand in poker unfolds in uncertainty. The professional learns to measure probability, infer patterns, and trust structure rather than emotion. Chapter 1: The Nature of Uncertainty. Uncertainty defines poker. Every hand begins in partial darkness, and every decision extends into probability rather than truth. You never see your opponent's cards. You never know the next card to fall. Professionals understand that this uncertainty is not flaw, but the very framework that gives the game meaning. Imagine you are on the button holding ace-10 suited. The player under the gun raises, and everyone folds to you. You do not know whether they hold ace-king, a pocket pair, or a suited connector. What you know is distribution. From early position, their range skews strong. That information, imperfect but directional, guides everything you decide next. If you call, you do so understanding your hand's relative position inside that range. You are behind their top holdings, but ahead of their medium pairs. Uncertainty becomes measurable tension rather than chaos. When the flop arrives 10-6-2 rainbow, you connect lightly. You check behind when they continuation bet small, realizing that while your top pair looks strong, the unknown portion of their range still dominates part of the time. This single hand demonstrates the nature of uncertainty. Each action narrows possibilities, but never removes doubt. Professionals accept this fluidity. They act not to find certainty, but to manage it. Inexperienced players try to force resolution. They demand to know, to guess exact cards, or call simply to confirm suspicion. That impulse converts unknown into risk. Professionals replace that impulse with structure. They quantify possibilities, anchor themselves in ratio, and accept that correct decisions can lose in the short run. Mathematically, uncertainty forms probability tree. Every bet branches into outcomes, weighted by likelihood. Each branch represents partial information, estimates built on position, history, and frequency. Professionals trace these branches calmly, using expected value as compass, rather than emotion. Emotionally, acceptance creates stillness. When you stop demanding complete information, the game slows down. You begin to notice small signals, bet sizing consistency, breathing rhythm, or time taken before action. Each piece of data becomes subtle light against the unknown. Another example clarifies this rhythm. You hold Queen-Jack of hearts in the big blind. The cutoff opens, and you call. The flop comes King-9-4 with one heart. You check. The opponent continuation bets. Half pot. You know they represent high cards, but your inside straight draw plus backdoor flush gives roughly 30% equity. You call, not because you know what they have, but because the math supports continuation despite uncertainty. The turn brings 8 of hearts. Now your draw improves. The opponent checks. This single action reshapes the probability tree. Strong top pairs usually keep betting, weak hands surrender. You sense shift in distribution. You bet small, forcing folds from unpaired holdings and building pot for future outs. Whether you win or lose this hand is irrelevant. What matters is that each action fits logical proportion under incomplete information. Professionals repeat this process endlessly. They are comfortable in ambiguity because they built their structure inside it. They do not chase clarity. They create order through observation, ratio, and rhythm. The nature of uncertainty reveals truth of poker. Perfection is impossible, but precision within imperfection is mastery. You do not conquer the unknown by guessing, you coexist with it calmly. Every decision a measured step through partial light. Chapter 2. The Limits of Perfect Knowledge. Perfect knowledge does not exist in poker. Every decision you make rests on probabilities, not certainty. You may analyze, calculate, and observe perfectly, yet there will always remain hidden cards, unseen motives, and future variables beyond control. Professionals accept these limits, knowing that mastery comes not from knowing everything, but from understanding how to act correctly, despite not knowing enough. Consider a simple hand. You hold ace-queen offsuit in the small blind. The button raises, and you 3-bet to isolate. The big blind folds, and the button calls. Already, you face partial information. Their flat call removes premium hands like aces or kings, but includes suited connectors, lower pairs, and maybe ace-jack suited. This is your best estimate, a structured assumption, not a fact. The flop comes king 7-4 rainbow. You continuation bet small, and they call. What do you know? Only that their range now includes middle pairs, weak kings, and speculative hands like 8-9 suited. But within that knowledge lies uncertainty. You do not know which combination they hold, and therefore cannot know if you lead or trail. Here lies the limit of perfect knowledge. The temptation for amateurs is to guess, to assign a single hand, to believe they must have a king. Professionals think differently. They maintain open distribution. They use proportion, not prediction. The turn brings the 2 of clubs, a blank. You check. Your opponent bets 2/3 pot. Many players react emotionally here, folding too quickly or raising impulsively. Professionals, however, interpret structure. They recognize that against a wide calling range, this bet polarizes. The opponent either holds a king or a bluff. Since your hand blocks ace-king, your call remains mathematically justified. You act not from certainty, but from ratio, the balance between equity and probability. This example illustrates the truth. Even perfect analysis cannot create perfect foresight. The river card might favor you or them. Your logic must remain independent of outcome. Professionals detach from result because they judge decisions by expected value, not by whether they win the hand. Mathematically, every hand represents imperfect equation. You possess known inputs, your cards, pot size, and previous actions, but missing variables always remain. Attempting to solve for all of them creates mental overload. Professionals streamline their reasoning through pattern recognition. They group scenarios, value-heavy, bluff-heavy, or mixed. This simplification maintains clarity when the details blur. Another situation highlights the boundary between data and faith in process. You hold pocket nines on the button. A tight player raises from middle position. You call, and the flop falls, jack 6-4. They continuation bet half pot. You call. The turn comes king of spades. They check. You check behind. The river pairs the jack, and they bet small. In this moment, your information is incomplete. Their turn check weakens range, but the small river bet suggests value, not bluff. You cannot know which pocket pair they hold. Folding feels safe, calling feels uncertain. Professionals accept that no logic can reveal the truth here. They make a neutral EV decision based on range versus range. Sometimes they call to keep frequencies balanced. Other times they fold to control variance. Both choices can be correct within structure. Emotionally, acknowledging these limits prevents frustration. Many players tilt because they expect the game to reward perfect reasoning with immediate results. It never does. Poker is probabilistic. Skill defines average, not instant. Professionals act calmly, knowing that variance hides truth in short term, but reveals it over time. The limits of perfect knowledge also create empathy. Every opponent operates under the same uncertainty. Recognizing that shared condition removes hostility and builds patience. The professional no longer battles others, they battle chaos itself. Perfect knowledge is illusion. What remains is structure, ratio, and trust in logic. Each hand, each session, becomes practice in accepting imperfection while maintaining precision. The player who understands this no longer fears the unknown. They respect it, and through that respect, they find control within chaos. Chapter 3: Information as Currency. In poker, information is a form of currency. Every decision, every gesture, every pause is a transaction. You buy information through observation, spend it when you reveal your own patterns, and trade it in every pot you contest. Professionals manage this exchange carefully, knowing that the one who controls information flow often controls expectation. At its core, poker is an economy of knowledge. Each player begins the hand with equal opportunity, but not equal data. Observation is your income. Every time an opponent bets, checks, hesitates, or adjusts posture, you receive payment in clues. But like any currency, information loses value when spent carelessly. Professionals preserve their own opacity while collecting from others efficiently. Consider a hand where you hold 10-9 of spades in the cutoff. The player under the gun opens to 3 big blinds, and 2 others call. You call as well, seeing a 4-way flop of ace-7-4 with 2 spades. The first player continuation bets half pot, the next folds, and the third calls. You pause. Here you are not just deciding whether to call, you are purchasing information. A call invites future bets that clarify ranges. A raise, on the other hand, spends information immediately, revealing strength and intent. Professionals understand that aggression communicates. Sometimes that message costs more than it earns. You choose to call, preserving both flexibility and range opacity. The turn brings Queen of Hearts, adding potential for semi-bluff continuation. The under-the-gun player now checks, while the caller before you also checks. Their silence is currency too. It indicates caution, perhaps weakness. You sense that both have capped ranges. You bet 2/3 pot, representing strong ace or better. Both fold. The profit comes not only from fold equity, but from how you managed information flow. You spent less early and earned more late. Information always travels. Betting reveals something, even when designed to mislead. Checking reveals restraint or intention to induce. Timing, body language, even chip placement transmits signal. Professionals treat these signals like financial statements. Each must be read carefully, but none interpreted in isolation. Another example. You hold pocket jacks on the button. The cutoff raises, you 3-bet, and they call. The flop comes King 8-3 rainbow. They check, you continuation bet small, and they call quickly. That speed, while not definitive, communicates familiarity. They likely hold middle pair or ace high, not a trap. Information exchanged. On the turn 5 of diamonds, they check again. You check behind. Your action now conceals range depth. You intentionally hide information, saving it for future street. The river brings 2 of clubs. They check once more. Your check back earns showdown clarity. They reveal ace-10 suited. You lose a small pot, but gain data, speed of call, board texture reaction, and passive follow-up. That information will pay interest later in the session. Professionals view every hand as series of investments. Each decision either acquires, spends, or protects informational equity. The value of each piece depends on timing. Early information is cheap. Actions in pre-flop range mapping are predictable. Post-flop information grows expensive. Players defend more carefully, hiding intention. Mathematically, information translates to expected value through reduced uncertainty. Each accurate inference shifts your probability tree closer to correct line. Every reveal narrows variance. The professional mind tracks these shifts silently, converting perception into measurable advantage. Emotionally, managing information requires stillness. Excitement leaks data. Frustration distorts perception. Professionals maintain neutral rhythm, ensuring their own expression never betrays balance. Their calmness is not performance, it is defense. Information is the invisible stack on the table. Chips measure outcome, but information measures sustainability. You can lose a pot and still win expectation if you collect more data than you gave. Over time, that informational surplus compounds quietly, producing profit unseen by the casual eye. In poker's long game, money follows knowledge. The professional learns to treat silence, timing, and observation like currency, earned through patience, invested through logic, and protected through composure. When used correctly, information becomes the only wealth that never runs out. Chapter 4: Estimating Hidden Variables. Hidden variables are the unseen forces that shape every decision in poker. These include your opponent's exact holdings, their emotional state, fatigue, confidence, and recent history at the table. You cannot measure them directly, but you can estimate them through logic and observation. Professionals live in that estimation, balancing probability with discipline to act rationally in the dark. Every hand begins with a set of knowns and unknowns. You know your cards, stack sizes, and board texture. You do not know opponent cards, emotional stability, or intentions. The professional mind immediately begins constructing a model to bridge this gap, an evolving framework of assumptions tested and updated in real time. Imagine you are on the button with Queen 10 of clubs. A middle position player opens, and you call. The blinds fold. The flop falls ace-9-3 with 2 clubs. Your opponent bets half pot. Right now, the hidden variables are range composition and motive. Do they bet because they connected, or because they always continuation bet? This texture. You analyze evidence. This player's pre-flop frequency suggests moderate aggression, and their sizing is balanced, neither strong nor weak. Your draw has equity, but not certainty. You call. The turn comes 6 of diamonds. They check. This single action reveals shift in distribution. Strong aces would often continue betting. Weak hands might give up. You estimate that their range now leans toward medium pairs or delayed bluffs. You bet small, forcing folds from those hands, while building flexibility for the river. Nothing about this hand required seeing their cards. You estimated hidden variables through logic, observation, and probability. Mathematically, estimation means assigning weight to possible outcomes. If your opponent continuation bets the flop 70% of the time, but only with strong hands 30%, then most of their bets belong to weaker range. This doesn't predict exact holdings, it defines ratio. Poker operates on ratio, not revelation. Hidden variables extend beyond the cards. Watch a live opponent's rhythm. They may breathe faster during large pots, glance subconsciously toward chips when strong, or sit perfectly still when bluffing. Online, timing tells emerge instead. Instant actions suggest autopilot ranges. Long pauses indicate conflict between hand strength and line consistency. Professionals note these patterns, not to exploit immediately, but to store for verification. Another example clarifies how professionals handle incomplete evidence. You hold pocket fives in the small blind. The cutoff raises, and you call. The flop comes 10-7-5 rainbow. You check, and your opponent continuation bets. You call slowly. The turn brings queen of hearts. You check again, and they check behind. The river brings jack of clubs, a coordinated card. You check, and your opponent bets large. Hidden variables now multiply. Did they trap with a straight? Did they miss a draw and bluff? The board favors their range, but your set is still strong. You estimate their line backward. If they held strong, made hands, would they check the turn? Likely not. The check behind reveals weakness disguised by river aggression. You call. They reveal king-9 suited, missed straight. Estimation thrives on contrast. When actions conflict with logic, truth emerges. Emotionally, professionals remain detached from outcome. A correct call that loses is still a success if the estimation process was sound. This separation between logic and result protects confidence through variance. Estimating hidden variables also requires humility. Professionals know their models are approximations, not guarantees. They update instantly when new evidence appears, avoiding attachment to first impressions. That adaptability, constant revision under pressure, is what separates discipline from guesswork. Poker will always contain hidden layers, but they are not unknowable. With structure, observation, and ratio, the invisible becomes measurable. Professionals read between actions, not beyond them. They trust the balance between math and intuition, finding truth not in certainty, but in proportion. When you learn to estimate hidden variables calmly, you stop fearing the unknown. You begin guiding it, shaping probability through logic, until even the dark feels predictable. Chapter 5: Bayesian Thinking in Poker. Bayesian thinking is the quiet math behind intuition. It's the habit of updating your beliefs as new evidence appears. In poker, every bet, check, and call changes what you know about your opponent's range. Professionals rely on this constantly, even if they don't call it by name. It's the logic that replaces guessing with balance and proportion. It starts with what's called a prior, your first assumption about what hands your opponent might hold. As the hand unfolds, you collect new data. Each action either strengthens or weakens your belief. You blend what you already knew with what you just learned, forming a refined probability, what's called a posterior. Then the process repeats, every street, every bet, narrowing your uncertainty a little more. Let's walk through it. You're in the cutoff with King-Queen of spades. The player under the gun raises, and you call. The blinds fold. Pre-flop, your prior is simple. An early position raise usually means strength. Ace-king, ace-queen, big pairs or suited broadways. You have a good but slightly dominated hand, so you plan to play with caution and use your position wisely. Flop, the board comes Jack, 10, 5 with 2 hearts. Your opponent bets about 2/3 of the pot. Now you update your belief. That sizing leans toward a value-heavy continuation range. But this flop also connects with your hand. You have an open-ended straight draw and 2 overcards. You call. Turn. The turn brings the 3 of spades, a blank. Your opponent checks. Would someone with aces or kings check this board? Some would, but many keep betting for protection. That check slightly reduces the chance of overpairs and increases the odds of ace-queen or weaker hands. You bet small, representing a top pair or controlled draw. They call. River, the 9 of hearts completes your straight, but also brings in a possible flush. Your opponent checks again. You bet with confidence. They fold. At every street, you naturally performed Bayesian updating. You started with a prior, revised it with each action, and reached a new conclusion. You weren't guessing, you were adjusting proportionally. In simple form, the math looks like this. New belief equals old belief, multiplied by the strength of new evidence. But at the table, you don't need the formula. You just need the feel. Strong evidence, like a big bet on a dry board, shifts your belief sharply. Weak evidence, like a routine continuation bet, adjusts it only slightly. Here's another quick example. You have pocket eights in the big blind. The button raises, and you call. The flop comes queen, 7, 4, all different suits. You check. They bet small, and you call. The turn is the ace of hearts. They bet again, a bit larger. That second barrel on the ace makes strong hands or total air more likely. You call once more, knowing some bluffs remain. The river brings the 3 of clubs, a blank. They check behind and show king 10 offsuit. Your calm, proportionate reasoning let you find truth through structure. You didn't need certainty, just a sense of weighted likelihood. This mindset also helps your emotions. When you see decisions as evolving estimates, mistakes stop feeling like failures. You didn't misread the hand, you just got new evidence too late to update. That approach reduces tilt and builds confidence. Bayesian thinking also sharpens intuition. The more hands you play and review, the faster your mind updates automatically. What feels like instinct is really stored probability, reacting in real time. The best players train this skill off the felt. They replay hands backward, asking, given what I saw, what odds would I assign now? That habit builds future accuracy, until analysis becomes reflex. You'll never know everything in poker. But with Bayesian thinking, you'll always know a little more than before. Every piece of evidence moves you forward, calmly, logically, one decision at a time. Chapter 6. Managing Cognitive Load. Cognitive load is the mental weight you carry during play. Every hand adds pressure, pot odds, range estimation, position, texture, image, and emotion. Professionals manage this load carefully, simplifying their decision process, without losing precision, Mastery in poker is not about thinking more, it is about thinking efficiently. Cognitive load increases with complexity. Multi-way pots, deep stacks, or unpredictable opponents stretch mental capacity. The goal is not to avoid complexity, but to structure it, organizing attention so your mind never overloads. Professionals accomplish this through prioritization, pattern recognition, and rhythm. Imagine you are 6 hours into a long cash session. Fatigue has settled in. You sit in the big blind with King Jack of diamonds. The button raises, the small blind calls, and you defend. The flop falls Jack 7-5 with 2 clubs. The small blind checks, you check. The button bets half pot. At this point, your cognitive load spikes. You must assess board texture, player tendencies, and stack depth while staying alert to fatigue. Professionals follow structure. Step 1. Identify what matters. You have top pair, strong kicker, and position disadvantage. Step 2. Eliminate noise. Ignore irrelevant data, like previous small talk or distant hands, and focus on action flow. Step 3. Simplify ranges. Button c-bets this board, nearly always. You call. The turn brings 10 of spades, adding open-ended straight draw. You check, they check behind. Mental workload reduces instantly because you planned ahead. If they checked, you'd control pot. You've already made the next step simple before it happens. The river 2 of hearts arrives. You bet half pot for value, get called, and win. Nothing about this hand was extraordinary, but it demonstrates how structure prevents fatigue. You did not analyze endlessly, you followed a process. Mathematically, managing load improves expected value by minimizing error rate. Most poker mistakes occur not from lack of skill, but from mental overload, too many inputs, too little structure. By prioritizing the most relevant variables, professionals maintain clarity longer. To build this endurance, professionals categorize decisions into 3 layers: automatic, pre-flop ranges, standard bet sizings, and pot odds estimations become reflex. Semi-automatic, adjustments based on position, texture, and stack depth require brief conscious thought. Deliberate, complex, rare situations demand full focus. This hierarchy allows the brain to conserve resources. Automatic actions cost almost nothing mentally, leaving energy for difficult moments. Another scenario illustrates the value of structure. You hold ace-5 of spades on the button. The cutoff raises, and you call. The flop is 9-7-2 with 1 spade. The cutoff bets large. Instead of calculating every combination, you follow mental shortcut: dry texture plus large bet, polarized range. Your hand weak equity with backdoor potential. Action fold. Decision complete in seconds, saving energy for later. Emotionally, managing load also protects composure. Overthinking breeds anxiety, which clouds logic and accelerates fatigue. Professionals regulate breathing and posture to keep tempo slow. Calm rhythm slows thought decay. Outside the table, professionals train this muscle through deliberate study. They review hand categories, run simulations, and visualize patterns until repetition builds automation. Each habit you internalize before play reduces cognitive demand during it. Technology can assist, but must not replace awareness. Databases, solvers, and HUDs provide external memory, but professionals integrate this data calmly, ensuring that real-time decisions still flow naturally. Tools extend clarity, they do not create it. In essence, cognitive load is the price of awareness. The more structure you have, the less it costs. Professionals think clearly, not because they know more, but because they have trained their minds to ignore what does not matter. Efficiency is discipline in disguise. You conserve energy for the moments that deserve it, think cleanly under fatigue, and maintain balance through chaos. The player who manages load wins not by knowing everything, but by staying calm long enough to use what they already know. Chapter 7: Prior Probability and Range Estimation. Every poker hand begins with a hypothesis. Before a single card hits the felt, professionals assign probabilities, initial beliefs about what each opponent might hold. This is called prior probability, the starting framework for decision-making. As each street unfolds, that framework evolves, refined by new evidence. Think of poker as a chain of conditional logic. You start with prior assumptions about range, then update those assumptions as actions occur. The professional mind constantly adjusts these probabilities, not searching for one exact hand, but building weighted possibilities that reflect the most likely combinations. Consider a hand where you hold ace-jack, suited in the cutoff. The player under the gun raises to 3 big blinds. Everyone folds to you. Before you act, your brain forms a prior. You know that early position ranges are tighter, often composed of premium pairs, strong aces, and Broadway combinations. You estimate something like premium pairs, aces through tens, 40%, strong Broadways, ace-king, ace-queen, king-queen, 40%, suited connectors or lower pairs, 20%. With that prior, you decide to call in position. The blinds fold, and the flop comes Queen 9-4 rainbow. The opponent continuation bets half pot. Now the prior evolves. A small bet here represents either control with overpairs, or a standard continuation frequency with missed hands. You lower the probability of sets slightly. Most players bet larger when protecting. You also discount weaker pairs. Few players continuation bet low pocket pairs into such a dry board. The remaining range clusters around ace-queen, king-queen, or ace-king. You call, knowing your backdoor draws and position preserve equity. The turn brings 10 of hearts, completing your straight. The opponent checks. This single action shifts the entire range model. Checking reduces probability of overpairs and increases likelihood of marginal holdings or pot control decisions with top pair. You bet 2/3 pot, targeting that mid-strength region. The opponent folds. At no point did you need certainty. Prior estimation and structured revision guided the entire hand. Mathematically, prior probability establishes equilibrium. Without it, every hand becomes random guesswork. Professionals internalize positional priors so deeply that they no longer calculate consciously. They feel distribution through repetition. Another scenario reinforces the method. You hold pocket sixes in the big blind. A loose player raises from the button. Your prior for their opening range is wide, many suited connectors, weak aces, and Broadway trash. You call. The flop comes king 8-5 with 2 diamonds. You check. They continuation bet 1/3 pot. Against a wide prior, this small sizing carries little strength. You call. The turn brings 9 of hearts. You check again. They bet larger this time, 2/3 pot. Now the probability shifts. Players often increase sizing when semi-bluffing with equity. You increase weight of draws like Queen 10, 10-7, and flushes, while reducing strong-made hands, which usually continue small. The river brings 2 of clubs. You check. They check back, showing Queen 10 offsuit for missed straight. This outcome confirms your prior accuracy. You didn't predict exact hand, you maintained a probabilistic model that narrowed as evidence arrived. Emotionally, this method prevents reactionary thinking. Many players guess rigidly. They must have it, or they're bluffing. Professionals never commit to absolutes. Their decisions flow with ratio, not certainty. They act on likelihood, aware that correct logic sometimes loses individual pots but wins across time. Prior estimation also protects discipline when unfamiliar players enter the table. Rather than fear the unknown, professionals begin with population priors, averages learned from thousands of similar situations. As hands progress, they refine model using observed tendencies. Prior probability and range estimation transform poker from guessing game into structured reasoning. You begin each hand not with a void, but with framework. Every card, every action, either strengthens or weakens that framework until logic converges toward balance. Professionals trust that process fully. They never need to know exactly what the opponent holds. It is enough to know what they probably hold and to act calmly within that probability. Chapter 8: The Psychology of Ambiguity. Ambiguity is the emotional weight of uncertainty. It is not the absence of information, but the discomfort of not knowing which interpretation is true. Poker magnifies this feeling. You cannot see your opponent's cards. You cannot predict the next turn card, and every decision carries risk. Professionals learn not to escape ambiguity, but to coexist with it, calmly, rationally, and with measured confidence. For most players, ambiguity triggers anxiety. The human brain craves closure. It wants to assign meaning even when none exists. This instinct can lead to false certainty, a dangerous condition where a player decides too early that an opponent must have it, or can't possibly have it. Professionals guard against this mental trap by grounding themselves in probability instead of emotion. Imagine you are on the river with Ace-Queen of Hearts on a board of King-Jack 10-5-3 rainbow. You have the nuts. But the value of this example is not that you win, it's the moments leading up to clarity. Pre-flop, your opponent raised from middle position. You called. On the flop, they bet large, then checked the turn. At that stage, ambiguity was high. You could not tell whether they slowed down with Ace-King or gave up with Air. Many players feel tension here. Professionals feel curiosity. They interpret behavior, but they do not attach judgment. On the river, when your straight completed, you bet big. Your opponent folded instantly. The outcome resolved, but the process mattered more. For 2 streets, you operated inside ambiguity, making decisions based on ratio rather than emotion. Ambiguity becomes dangerous when it feeds ego. Players often act aggressively to restore control, bluffing impulsively, or folding too soon just to remove pressure. Professionals recognize this instinct in themselves and others. When uncertainty feels uncomfortable, they slow tempo, breathe evenly, and let structure guide the next action. Mathematically, ambiguity exists because probabilities overlap. If an opponent's range includes both value and bluff in equal frequency, your decision becomes balanced, not clear. Professionals do not fear this equilibrium, they welcome it. It means they are playing the game correctly, standing at the precise intersection where strategy meets variance. Another example illustrates emotional resilience under ambiguity. You hold pocket tens in the small blind. The cutoff raises, and you call. The flop comes 9-7-5 with 2 spades. You check, they continuation bet small. You call. The turn brings the queen of diamonds. You check again, and they bet half pot. This is ambiguity in motion. Their range includes everything from overpairs to semi-bluffs. Folding feels safe, but may surrender equity. Raising might isolate against strength. Professionals lean into uncertainty, not away from it. You call once more. The river brings deuce of spades, completing the flush. Both players check. They reveal king-queen, and you win. This hand matters, because you acted correctly under doubt. You did not know where you stood, but your decisions followed proportion, strong enough to continue, cautious enough to control pot. Psychologically, professionals practice exposure to ambiguity. Through thousands of hands, they desensitize emotional reaction to unclear spots. What once felt chaotic becomes normal. Each repetition strengthens the ability to think logically under uncertainty. Outside the game, mental discipline supports this mindset. Meditation, journaling, and structured review all reinforce tolerance for ambiguity. The goal is not emotional suppression, but awareness, recognizing discomfort without reacting to it. Ambiguity is not failure of knowledge. It is the natural state of a probabilistic game. Professionals thrive in it because they have redefined confidence. Confidence, to them, means comfort within the unknown. In poker, peace does not come from certainty. It comes from rhythm. Each hand teaches the same truth. Clarity is temporary, ambiguity, eternal. The professional breathes through both, acting with calm logic until structure returns. Chapter 9. Maintaining Composure Amid Chaos. Composure is the anchor that holds logic steady when emotion and noise threaten to pull it apart. In poker, chaos is inevitable. Bad beats, long sessions, complex decisions, and unpredictable opponents all generate turbulence. Professionals separate themselves not through brilliance, but through stability. They remain calm when variance roars, when stacks swing, and when information dissolves into confusion. Composure is a practiced discipline. It begins with awareness of physiological response. Stress triggers acceleration. The heart beats faster, breathing shortens, hands tense. Professionals recognize these signals as alerts, not commands. Instead of reacting, they pause. One breath reclaims the space between impulse and logic. That space, small but powerful, protects expected value. Imagine you are in a deep stacked cash game, holding pocket kings. You 3-bet pre-flop, get called, and see a flop of ace-10-7. Your opponent, a capable regular, check raises your continuation bet. The situation is instantly chaotic. Your overpair shrinks, the board threatens, and uncertainty spikes. Many players panic here, assuming the worst. Professionals slow everything down. They start by evaluating structure. What hands would the opponent check raise? Sets, maybe ace-10, or perhaps a semi-bluff with jack-queen. Then they calculate proportion. How often must you call to prevent exploitation? Roughly 2/3 of the time against this sizing. Calm logic dictates that folding immediately would give up too much equity. You call, not because you feel comfortable, but because ratio demands it. The turn brings 5 of hearts, adding straight draws. The opponent bets big. You pause again, reassessing. Against this population, large double barrels skew toward bluffs with equity. You call once more. The river blanks, 2 of clubs. Your opponent shoves. You fold, quietly. You do not celebrate surviving the hand or mourn losing chips. You simply log the data. That hand represents composure. You moved through chaos by thinking proportionally, never emotionally. Each breath reset awareness, each calculation preserved structure. Mathematically, composure stabilizes decision quality. Under stress, brain chemistry shifts. Adrenaline sharpens focus briefly, but impairs precision. Rational capacity narrows. Risk perception distorts. Professionals counter this with ritual, controlled breathing, steady posture, consistent pace. This consistency acts like metronome, regulating thought speed regardless of pressure. Composure also extends beyond single hands. Imagine a tournament setting. You lose a massive flip, deep in an event, dropping from chip leader to short stack. Many players spiral, tilt replaces logic. Professionals feel the same disappointment, but transition faster. They acknowledge emotion, breathe through it, and return to equilibrium before the next hand begins. Composure transforms collapse into continuation. Another example illustrates emotional control under variance. You hold ace-king suited and get all-in pre-flop against pocket queens for a large pot. The flop brings a king, giving you the lead, but the river delivers a queen. The pot slides away. Your body tenses. The room feels louder. Yet the professional's mind remains still. This was a positive EV decision. The outcome changes nothing. Variance has no memory, and neither should you. Composure does not mean numbness. Professionals feel frustration, but they express it privately, after the session. At the table, they maintain rhythm, clean chips, even breathing, consistent timing. The act of physical stability reinforces mental stillness. In multi-table tournaments or marathon sessions, composure compounds advantage. As fatigue drains others, calm players retain efficiency. Their logic decays slower, their patience lasts longer, and their range control remains sharp while others unravel. Composure amid chaos is not natural, it is trained. Professionals build it through reflection, routine, and deliberate exposure to stress. They review past emotional responses, track triggers, and design rituals that bring them back to center. Each time they survive chaos calmly, confidence grows quietly inside structure. Poker will always generate turbulence. You cannot stop the waves, but you can learn to float. Professionals drift through variance with quiet rhythm, anchored by breath, guided by logic. When chaos peaks, they do not fight it, they outlast it. Chapter 10. Emotional drift in unclear spots. Emotional drift is not a sudden loss of control, it is a gradual slide. It happens quietly, during long sessions, or in hands where the right decision feels uncertain. At first you think clearly. Then fatigue, frustration, or overconfidence begin to color your reasoning. You still believe you are playing logically, but subtle emotion has already entered your process. Professionals learn to recognize this drift early and realign before imbalance becomes pattern. Drift begins where ambiguity grows. Imagine you hold ace-jack of clubs on the button. The cutoff opens, and you call. The flop comes king 9-4 with 2 clubs. Your opponent bets large, and you call with your flush draw. The turn brings Queen of Hearts, giving you an open-ended straight draw. Your opponent bets again, smaller this time. You call. The river brings the Three of Diamonds, a miss. They bet large. Here uncertainty floods the hand. You have no showdown value, but their sizing suggests strength. Yet their line, large, small, large, contradicts itself. Emotion whispers, they could be bluffing. This is the pivot point where emotional drift begins. Logic says folding is safest, given missed draws and limited fold equity. Emotion, craving redemption, pushes for heroism. Professionals recognize this internal pull. Instead of reacting, they pause, breathe, and mentally reset. What range bets large, small, large? How does my hand fit into my defense range? If the math says fold, they fold, regardless of how unfair the spot feels. Drift doesn't always look dramatic. Sometimes it appears as impatience, calling too wide in small pots, or bluffing a turn out of boredom. Other times it manifests as caution, checking back too often after a loss. Both stem from emotion, subtly replacing ratio. Mathematically, emotional drift erodes expected value by shifting frequencies. When you call more than optimal, your defense frequency rises above equilibrium, allowing exploitation. When you bluff less, your aggression frequency falls below required ratio, letting opponents fold profitably. These deviations seem harmless individually, but compound across volume. Another example, you've been card dead for an hour in a tournament. Finally, you pick up pocket nines in middle position. You raise, the button calls, and the flop comes, Queen 8-5. You continuation bet small, and the opponent calls. The turn brings King of Spades, not ideal. You check, they bet. Here frustration surfaces. You've waited so long for a playable hand that folding feels unbearable. The mind justifies action emotionally. I deserve a pot. Professionals know that thought is drift disguised as logic. The correct choice remains fold, not because of emotion, but because range disadvantage demands it. Drift also follows success. After winning a big hand, adrenaline lingers. Confidence turns into subtle arrogance, playing too loose, chasing marginal spots, or pressing advantage unnecessarily. Professionals label this as positive tilt, less obvious but equally dangerous. The solution remains the same: awareness and reset. The professional toolkit for drift prevention includes rhythm and ritual. A brief pause after each major pot, steady breathing between hands, and consistent posture all act as anchors. These habits reconnect thought to structure before emotion gains momentum. Outside of live play, reviewing emotional patterns helps build immunity. Professionals track hands where logic failed, labeling the emotional cause: frustration, fear, fatigue, pride. Over time, these patterns become visible and manageable. Emotion will always enter the game. Drift is inevitable. The mastery lies in detection and correction. Professionals treat each moment of imbalance as feedback, not failure. They restore calm through small adjustments, slowing pace, tightening range, recentering on fundamentals. Poker's deepest truth is that composure is not constant, it is maintained. Every player drifts. The difference is who notices it first. Professionals don't punish themselves for emotion. They observe it, reset, and continue with quiet precision. When uncertainty clouds thought, awareness clears it. You may not always control outcome, but you can always control rhythm. In that rhythm, emotion fades and structure returns. Chapter 11. Probability Mapping. Probability mapping is the art of turning uncertainty into structure. It means creating a mental model of possible outcomes, assigning weight to each, and updating that map as evidence unfolds. Professionals rely on this invisible framework to guide their decisions, especially when hands become complex or ambiguous. Instead of seeing a single correct line, they visualize a range of possibilities, each with its own likelihood. The map is not static, it moves as actions occur. Every bet, check, or pause shifts the shape of probability. The more accurately you draw this map, the more calmly you can navigate uncertainty. Imagine holding ace-10 of hearts on the button. A tight player opens from early position, and you call in position. The blinds fold. Flop, king 9-4, with 2 hearts. Your opponent continuation bets half the pot. Immediately, the mapping begins. Their pre-flop range includes strong aces, big pairs, and suited broadways. The flop bet confirms a wide value and bluff frequency. You call with both flush potential and position. Turn, 7 of clubs. The opponent bets small again. The size matters. Small bets typically indicate range-wide continuation, not polarization. You assign high probability to medium-strength holdings like ace-king, king-queen, or pocket queens. River, 2 of hearts. The flush completes. Your opponent checks. Your map shifts dramatically. Many strong hands in their range, aces, kings, or top pairs. Now check to control. You bet, 2/3 pot for value. They call with king-queen. This hand demonstrates the mapping process. At each street, you refined possibilities based on new data. You didn't guess, you reweighted. Mathematically, this process mirrors expected value analysis. Each possible outcome carries probability and payoff. You multiply the two to estimate total expectation. But professionals don't compute exact numbers mid-hand. They think in proportions. This line beats me sometimes, but wins more often than it loses. The brain stores these ratios over time, forming an intuitive model that feels like instinct, but is built on math. Probability mapping also prevents emotional overreaction. When you understand where uncertainty lives, surprises no longer shock you. If a low probability event occurs, like an opponent hitting a 2-outer, you acknowledge it as part of the distribution, not an injustice. Professionals separate process from outcome through mapping awareness. A second example shows how mapping applies to defense. You hold pocket 7s in the big blind. A balanced player opens from the cutoff, and you call. Flop, 10-8-3 rainbow. You check, they bet 1/3 pot. Your initial map gives them broad range overcards, pairs, and some backdoor draws. You call, defending middle equity. Turn, 5 of spades. They bet again, 2/3 pot. The increased size changes your map. Now their range polarizes. Strong top pairs, overpairs, or pure bluffs. Your 7s beat bluffs and semi-bluffs, but lose to most value. You call, noting that folding too often allows exploitation. River, queen of clubs. They fire a large 3rd barrel. The map narrows again. This size almost never comes from weak pairs. You fold confidently, understanding that against population tendencies, this triple barrel skews heavily towards strength. You lose the pot, but maintain accuracy. The mapping process confirms discipline, every fold and call justified by ratio, not fear. Emotionally, probability mapping transforms doubt into data. You no longer chase certainty, you measure uncertainty. Each action, each pause, becomes part of pattern recognition that builds intuitive clarity over time. Outside of gameplay, professionals practice mapping through review. They replay hands, pausing at each street to ask, what portion of range bets here? What folds? What continues? Over thousands of iterations, their mental maps grow more precise and automatic. Probability mapping is how the professional mind stays organized amid chaos. Instead of drowning in unknowns, they navigate by probability lines, trusting structure over instinct. Poker will never give complete information, but mapping ensures that every unknown has its place and every decision has reason. When uncertainty feels overwhelming, remember, the map already exists. You are not lost, you are simply moving through its probabilities, one calm decision at a time. Chapter 12. Risk Tolerance under Ambiguity. Every poker decision carries two layers of risk, the mathematical risk of losing chips and the psychological risk of being wrong. Risk tolerance is how you handle both. Professionals understand that their tolerance level determines how they react when information is incomplete. Too much fear, and they fold away equity. Too much confidence, and they overextend into danger. Mastery lies between the two, measured exposure balanced by emotional control. Risk tolerance is personal. It depends on bankroll, mindset, and experience. Professionals develop it deliberately, calibrating the amount of volatility they can endure without losing discipline. They know that correct strategy often means accepting discomfort, and that comfort without logic is simply complacency. Imagine you hold ace-queen offsuit on the button, in a tournament with a medium stack. A tight player opens from middle position. Everyone folds to you. This is a classic ambiguous spot. Your hand is strong but vulnerable, and you do not know how they'll react to aggression. You have three choices: fold, call, or 3-bet. Folding sacrifices a playable hand and its equity, but preserves stack. Calling invites post-flop complexity. 3-betting risks confrontation, but maximizes fold equity. Professionals filter these options through tolerance. If you are comfortable facing a 4-bet, you choose the aggressive path. If not, you call, reducing variance, but keeping logic intact. The key is consistency. Your comfort level must match your overall range plan. Emotional decisions driven by fear or frustration distort balance. Mathematically, risk tolerance defines variance curve. The wider your curve, the larger your swings, but the higher your potential return. Professionals aim to operate near the edge of control, where expected value peaks but emotion remains stable. They know that playing too safe shrinks profit, while overexposure leads to tilt and poor recovery. Consider another hand. You are deep stacked in a cash game with pocket tens in the big blind. A loose aggressive player raises from the cutoff, and you 3-bet. They call. The flop comes Jack 9-4 with 2 spades. You continuation bet half pot, and they call quickly. The turn is 5 of hearts. You check, controlling pot size. They bet 2/3 pot. Here risk tolerance is tested. Calling means committing to large pot with medium strength hand. Folding may feel too tight against aggressive player. The professional weighs ratio calmly. They estimate the opponent's bluff frequency and compare it to pot odds. If call frequency aligns with equilibrium, they continue. The decision feels uncomfortable, but comfort is not the metric. Correctness is. The river brings 3 of clubs. You check, and your opponent shoves. This is the emotional peak, ambiguity at full volume. Many players fold instantly, fearing disaster. Professionals breathe, recall structure, and review evidence. What value hands shove here? What bluffs remain? If math shows enough missed draws, they call, accepting risk without emotion. Sometimes the call loses, and that is fine. The decision was right. Professionals judge success by process, not result. Emotionally, managing risk under ambiguity requires stillness. Professionals track internal signals, tension in chest, rushed breathing, impatience. When those arise, they slow down. This pause restores alignment between logic and tolerance. Off the table, they strengthen tolerance through experience. Reviewing hands that cause discomfort and simulating stressful scenarios builds resilience. Like weight training, each repetition expands emotional capacity to handle volatility. The real test of risk tolerance is not how big a pot you can play, but how calmly you can play it. Professionals never confuse bravery with recklessness or caution with weakness. True courage in poker is measured, mathematical, and quiet. In uncertainty, risk tolerance becomes compass. It tells you when to lean forward and when to pull back. The professional listens carefully, adjusting exposure with discipline rather than impulse. Because in poker, risk cannot be eliminated. It can only be understood, managed, and faced with composure. Chapter 13. The Power of Approximation. Perfection is impossible in poker. Every hand contains too many unknowns, too many branches, and too much emotion to solve exactly. Professionals accept this limitation. They do not aim for perfect calculation, they aim for accurate approximation. Approximation is how structure survives under pressure. It keeps decisions clean when full computation would slow or distort logic. Approximation means replacing precise math with functional reasoning. The professional brain learns to estimate ratios, odds, and equities within acceptable margins of error. Over time, these estimates become so consistent that they feel intuitive, but they are built from repetition and study. Consider a simple decision. You are in the big blind with 8-7 of hearts. The cutoff raises to 3 big blinds, and you call. The flop comes 10-6-2 with 1 heart. You check, your opponent bets half pot, and you consider a call. You know the pot is now 12 big blinds, and the call costs 6. Roughly, you are getting 2-1. You ask yourself, how often will I win this pot if I call? With a gut shot straight draw, backdoor hearts, and 2 live cards, your equity sits near 30%. You need about 33% to break even. Close enough. You call. That close enough mindset is approximation in motion. You didn't need to compute exact odds. You simply recognized that the call was marginally profitable, given pot size and draw strength. The turn comes Queen of Hearts, giving you additional outs. Your opponent bets half pot again. You know your equity increased. Now open-ended, plus flush draw. Nearly 50% to win. You call once more. The river brings a blank, and you fold to a large final bet. You lost the hand, but played perfectly by proportion. Mathematically, approximation preserves accuracy by removing cognitive friction. In live play, you rarely have time or clarity to run exact equations. Professionals memorize key ratios. A flush draw on the flop wins roughly 35% of the time by river. An open-ended straight draw wins about 31%. Two overcards hold around 25% against medium pairs. These mental shortcuts replace calculation without compromising integrity. Approximation also governs bet sizing. Instead of calculating precise equilibrium frequencies, professionals use ranges. 1/3 pot applies pressure to wide ranges. 2/3 polarizes. Full pot maximizes fold equity. These general patterns hold consistently enough to build entire strategies. Consider another example. You hold king-queen of spades in the cutoff. The button 3 bets, and you call. The flop comes ace-jack 4 with 2 spades. You have a strong draw, but no pair. Your opponent continuation bets large, 2/3 pot. You estimate you have about 12 outs, 9 spades plus 3 tens for roughly 24% equity. Pot odds give you around 28% required equity to call. It's close, but because you may gain implied odds if you hit, the call is justified. You didn't need exact percentages. Your internal math was precise enough to act decisively. Emotionally, approximation creates calm. Over-analysis breeds stress and indecision. When you trust your trained estimates, your focus shifts from calculation to execution. This trust separates disciplined players from perfectionists who freeze in motion. Approximation does not mean carelessness. It relies on foundation of correct study. Professionals build mental databases through solver work, equity drills, and review. Once internalized, those patterns guide instinct at live speed. The precision happened long before the hand. The performance feels effortless because the work is complete. Outside the game, approximation defines efficiency. Instead of memorizing thousands of precise spots, professionals learn guiding principles, pot odds, bluff-to-value ratios, and board textures. These rules create structure, flexible enough to handle infinite variation. In poker, perfection is illusion. The professional seeks consistency, not precision. They know that small estimation errors balance out over time, but hesitation never does. Approximation empowers you to think clearly in motion, to replace paralysis with proportion. Each decision becomes fast, logical, and quietly accurate. Over thousands of hands, that efficiency compounds into confidence. Mastery is not solving the unsolvable. It is acting calmly when the numbers blur, trusting your training to find clarity through rhythm and repetition. Chapter 14. Recognizing Unknowable Factors. Poker is built on the tension between what can be known and what never will be. Professionals master this distinction. They understand that certain details, exact hole cards, deck order, or opponent emotion, are unknowable. The key is not to remove uncertainty, but to identify where knowledge ends and discipline begins. Trying to solve the unsolvable is one of the fastest paths to tilt. Many players burn mental energy trying to figure out every action, assigning certainty to guesswork. Professionals save that energy for structure. They learn to act confidently within what can be measured and calmly accept what cannot. Imagine holding pocket jacks in a tournament. A player in early position raises, another calls, you call from the button. The blinds fold. The flop comes Queen 9-5 rainbow. The first player bets small, the second folds. You call, evaluating strength. The turn brings 7 of hearts. The opponent now bets large, nearly pot. You pause. Here, unknowable factors multiply. Do they always barrel this sizing with value? Are they emotionally tilting? Are they balancing their range properly, or improvising under stress? You can estimate their tendencies, but you cannot know them. Many players let frustration creep in. If I only knew whether they were bluffing. Professionals never chase that knowledge. They ask, what portion of their range would take this line, and how does my hand perform against that range? You call. The river comes ace of spades. The opponent shoves all in. You fold, not because you know they have it, but because your model cannot justify continuing. The correct fold is proof of respect for limits. You release control instead of forcing clarity. Mathematically, the unknowable portion of poker forms the game's variance engine. Every decision you make rests on incomplete data. Even if you knew your opponent's exact range, randomness in the deck would still create unpredictability. Professionals treat this remaining uncertainty as constant variable, neutral, not personal. Another example, you hold ace-king of hearts on the button in a cash game. The small blind 3 bets, and you call. The flop comes 10-4-2 with 1 heart. Your opponent continuation bets large. You call. The turn brings 7 of clubs. They check. You bet half pot. They call. The river comes jack of hearts, completing your backdoor flush. They check again. You bet 2/3 pot for value, and they tank call, showing queens. You win, but you never knew you were ahead. You acted based on ratio, your equity, your blockers, and their line. You trusted process without requiring certainty. Recognizing unknowable factors also means avoiding false confidence. Overconfidence appears when players mistake intuition for knowledge, declaring, "I just knew they had it." Professionals reject this illusion. Even accurate reads are probabilities, not prophecy. Emotionally, acceptance brings peace. When you acknowledge limits, you stop assigning moral weight to randomness. A 2-outer on the river is not betrayal by the deck, it's part of expected distribution. The professional does not curse variance, because they accounted for it before the session began. This mindset frees mental energy. By identifying what cannot be known, you focus on what can: position, pot size, ranges, and frequencies. That clarity sharpens every decision, while protecting emotional endurance. Outside of play, professionals practice awareness of uncertainty. They review hands not to divine exact holdings, but to test logic. Did my reasoning align with probability? Whether the opponent had a bluff or value becomes secondary. Accuracy of structure matters most. Recognizing unknowable factors is humility in action. It's the understanding that mastery does not mean omniscience, it means balance. Professionals think deeply, but not desperately. They analyze until the boundary of reason, then stop, calmly. In poker, clarity has borders. Beyond them lies noise. Professionals do not chase that noise. They listen only to rhythm within their reach. Each decision becomes confident, not because it's certain, but because it's correct within limits. Control ends where randomness begins, and peace begins where control ends. The professional thrives in that space. the quiet equilibrium between what can be calculated and what must be accepted. Chapter 15. The Discipline of Neutral Expectation. Neutral expectation is the state of acting logically when clarity fades. It means executing a decision with no emotional bias toward winning or losing. Professionals cultivate this discipline so their judgment remains precise, even when every option feels uncertain. In poker, many spots carry near equal expected value. Whether you call or fold, the long-term difference might be marginal. Yet in these gray zones, emotion often overrides proportion. Fear urges safety, pride urges aggression. Professionals silence both voices and return to ratio. Neutral expectation is not indecision, it is commitment to balance. Consider a common hand. You hold pocket eights in the big blind. A regular player opens from the cutoff, and you call. The flop falls, Queen 9-3 rainbow. You check, they continuation bet, half the pot. You call, aware that your hand still retains equity against a wide opening range. The turn brings 5 of hearts. They bet again, but smaller. This sizing shift creates uncertainty. Are they pot controlling a top pair or bluffing weak air? The expected value of folding or calling converges. Folding loses little in the long run. Calling may win small edges but increases variance. Professionals evaluate structure calmly. They estimate bluff frequency, weigh pot odds, and decide rationally. Here, calling maintains balance. It keeps their check-call range wide and prevents exploitation. You call, not from confidence, but from proportion. The river arrives ace of diamonds. They check. You check back. They show king 9 suited. You lose the pot, but not your discipline. You acted within neutral expectation, no attachment, no disappointment, just structure. Mathematically, neutral expectation prevents overcorrection. When players react emotionally to near 50-50 decisions, they tilt frequency. Folding too often surrenders EV. Bluffing too often creates leaks. Professionals stay at the center, accepting that small fluctuations will always exist. Over thousands of hands, those balanced choices compound into long-term edge. Another example illustrates discipline across larger scale. You are deep in a tournament, holding ace-10 of diamonds. The chip leader raises, and you defend from the big blind. The flop comes 10-7-4, with 2 clubs. You check, they continuation bet large. You call. The turn brings king of clubs, completing potential flushes. They check behind. The river is 4 of diamonds. You bet half the pot for thin value. The opponent calls and shows king-queen of hearts. You lose, but the hand was perfectly logical. You identified that your top pair beat many worse hands and still retained showdown value. Your bet was positive EV, even though variance disagreed in this instance. Neutral expectation means accepting that correct logic can lead to negative result and that outcome changes nothing. Emotionally, this mindset separates professionals from reactionary players. When ambiguity arises, many seek emotional relief through decisive action, bluffing recklessly to force clarity, or folding prematurely to end the stress. Professionals do neither. They maintain pace, breathing through uncertainty, and acting proportionally. Neutral expectation also guards against results-oriented thinking. A losing session does not imply poor play, just as a winning one does not confirm brilliance. Professionals analyze process metrics, hand quality, ratio accuracy, and composure over raw outcomes. Off the table, this discipline develops through reflection. Professionals review hands from the perspective of decision quality, not pot size. They ask, was this action consistent with my structure? If yes, emotion dissolves. If no, the correction becomes data, not guilt. Neutrality is not passivity, it is mastery of proportion. You are neither attached to winning nor afraid of losing. You act as probability dictates, confident that balance will restore itself over time. Poker rewards those who stay still inside motion. The professional's calm face is not absence of feeling, it is presence of awareness. They understand that neutrality is not emotionless, it is disciplined emotion, perfectly aligned with logic. In uncertain moments, neutrality becomes compass. It points not to victory or defeat, but to process, the only direction that never changes. Chapter 16. Inference through Elimination. Inference through elimination is the quiet detective work of poker. You rarely know exactly what your opponent holds, but by ruling out what they cannot have, the field of uncertainty narrows until logic becomes clear. Professionals use this process instinctively, stripping away impossibilities until the remaining range fits probability. Elimination begins with structure. Every action, raise, bet, or check, removes certain combinations from an opponent's range. A tight pre-flop raise eliminates weak offsuit hands. A turn check reduces strong value combinations. The more accurately you interpret each decision, the smaller the uncertainty becomes. Imagine you hold Queen 10 of spades in the big blind. The cutoff opens to 3 big blinds, and you call. The flop comes King 9-3 with 2 hearts. You check, they bet small. You call. Already elimination begins. By raising pre-flop, they excluded trash hands like 7-2 offsuit. Their small flop bet, however, keeps range wide. It could include overcards, draws, or middle pairs. The turn brings ace of diamonds. You check again. They check back. That single action removes most top pair hands. Players with strong aces often continue betting. What remains? Weaker pairs and missed draws. The river brings jack of clubs, giving you the nut straight. You bet small for value, and they fold instantly. You never knew what they held, but you knew what they didn't. Elimination guided profit through logic, not revelation. Mathematically, inference through elimination transforms uncertainty into weighted probability. Instead of analyzing infinite combinations, you narrow to those consistent with line and sizing. Each decision acts like filter, refining expectation until ratio emerges cleanly. A second example shows how this process applies defensively. You hold pocket tens in the cutoff. A player under the gun raises, and you call. The flop falls ace 10-5 rainbow. They continuation bet half pot. You call. The turn brings 8 of spades. They check. Already, elimination begins. If they had aces, they'd likely continue betting. Strong top pairs might also double barrel for protection. Their check discounts strong aces, leaving weaker holdings, perhaps king-queen, medium pairs, or controlled value. The river is 2 of hearts. They bet small. Now their sizing contradicts previous rhythm. Small bet after check back usually signals medium strength, not bluff. You raise for value. They fold, later claiming they had ace 7. The information aligns. Even though they technically had top pair, Their behavior removed them from that category in your mind. Your inference was structurally correct, even if imperfect. Emotionally, inference through elimination provides calm focus. Instead of chasing impossible clarity, you create order through logic. When faced with chaotic boards or unpredictable opponents, the process gives you steps to follow. Identify actions taken. Remove inconsistent hands. Reweigh remaining options. Act according to ratio. This method also protects against bias. Many players read hands by intuition, believing an opponent feels strong or weak. Professionals anchor reads in logic. If evidence does not fit, they discard it, regardless of instinct. Another layer involves recognizing population patterns. For example, in low-stakes live games, players rarely check strong-made hands twice. In online environments, aggressive regulars may underbluff certain turn cards. Knowing these tendencies accelerates elimination. Off the table, professionals train inference by reviewing hand histories backward. They start from the river and ask, given this action, what lines are consistent? This reverse engineering practice strengthens logical sequencing under pressure. Emotionally, elimination demands patience. The process unfolds slowly across streets, and impatience can destroy accuracy. Professionals trust tempo. Each check, bet, or fold refines truth until the final picture forms. Inference through elimination reminds you that poker is not about reading minds, it's about reading structure. You win by knowing what remains possible when everything impossible is gone. In the end, the professional's calm comes from this process. Even without certainty, they find stability in method. Each hand becomes investigation, each decision a clue. When others guess, they reason. When others fear the unknown, they define it by what it cannot be. Chapter 17. Reading frequency without pattern. Some opponents are unpredictable. They switch gears often, make unconventional decisions, and ignore the logic that defines structured play. Against these players, standard pattern recognition fails. The professional adapts not by seeking rhythm where none exists, but by measuring frequency, the underlying ratio of aggression and passivity that remains even when actions appear random. Every player, no matter how chaotic, reveals average tendencies over time. They may bluff inconsistently, but the ratio of bluffs to value hands still forms a measurable frequency. Professionals learn to detect this baseline by tracking outcomes, bet sizing, and tempo across many hands. Imagine facing a loose, impulsive opponent. You hold King 10 of clubs on the button. The player in the big blind has been alternating between wild overbets and passive checks all session. They call your raise pre-flop. Flop, Queen 10-3, with 2 hearts. They check, you bet half pot. They check raise 3 times the size. This is the chaos pattern: strong hands, weak hands, and bluffs mixed beyond recognition. You call. Turn, 5 of diamonds. They bet half pot quickly. You call again. River, 2 of hearts. The flush completes. They jam all in, overbetting the pot. Here, the structure is gone. You cannot rely on line logic because their play lacks coherence. Professionals instead evaluate frequency range. They recall that this player has overbet river bluffs earlier twice and shown value once. 2 bluffs to 1 value, roughly 2-1. That ratio alone defines response. Facing a pot-sized bet, you must win more than 33% of the time for a call to break even. Their frequency of bluffing meets that threshold. You call, and they show 9-8 of spades, missed straight. This is reading frequency without pattern. You don't predict specific hands, you interpret behavior statistically. Mathematically, this approach mirrors population analysis. You treat each opponent as small data sample. Over sessions, actions accumulate into tendencies, how often they continuation bet, fold to 3 bets, or double barrel after checking. Even random players operate within these ratios unconsciously. Another example, a live opponent who shifts between hyper-aggressive and passive lines. You hold pocket queens on a Jack 7-3 flop. They check call flop, then lead huge on a blank turn. Many players panic, thinking, this doesn't make sense. Professionals acknowledge it doesn't, but still measure frequency. They recall this opponent rarely checks strong hands twice, and often bluff leads when scared. Even without pattern, that bias exists. You call. The river blanks, they shove, you call again. They table 9-8 offsuit, pure air. The logic wasn't in line structure, it was in average frequency. Emotionally, reading frequency without pattern requires detachment. You must abandon the expectation of consistency. Many players waste focus searching for sense in nonsense, growing frustrated when logic fails. Professionals accept chaos as environment, not anomaly. They act through math, not meaning. Patience refines the model. Over short samples, randomness dominates. Over hundreds of hands, tendencies reappear. Professionals gather small pieces, timing, sizing, emotional rhythm, until averages emerge. Technology reinforces this approach. Online tracking tools reveal frequencies numerically, but even live players can sense them intuitively. For instance, you notice that one opponent bluffs big on rivers roughly 1 out of every 4 times. The exact pattern doesn't matter, the ratio does. That ratio defines counter strategy. Call wider, fold less often. Off the table, professionals train this awareness through review. They study opponent logs, marking down how often aggression succeeds or fails. This transforms emotional memory into quantifiable structure. Mathematically, frequencies anchor logic when patterns disappear. Emotionally, they restore calm. You no longer need to figure out your opponent, you just need to measure them over time. When no pattern exists, proportion remains. Every player, no matter how chaotic, repeats some average rhythm. The professional listens for that rhythm, the way a musician hears tempo in noise. Even disorder carries beat. You cannot control the unpredictability of others, but you can stabilize your own interpretation. Professionals thrive amid inconsistency because they stop expecting order. They create it through ratio. Reading frequency without pattern is the bridge between chaos and clarity. It transforms randomness into data and confusion into calm. Chapter 18. Adaptive Confidence. Confidence in poker cannot be static. The game evolves, cards run unevenly, and outcomes often contradict logic. Professionals build adaptive confidence, a mindset rooted in process, not performance. It allows them to trust structure, even through losing sessions, variant swings, or changing dynamics. Confidence begins as belief in preparation. Professionals do not draw strength from results, they draw it from repetition, study, and system. Every reviewed hand, solved scenario, and pattern observed, becomes foundation. That foundation allows flexibility when uncertainty rises. Adaptive confidence does not mean unshakable certainty. It means calm persistence amid fluctuation. Imagine you are deep in a tournament. You've been card dead for 2 hours. Your stack has slipped from average to short. You pick up ace-5 suited on the button. The cutoff raises. You shove. They snap call with pocket nines. The flop brings 3 low cards, turn a 5, river a blank, you bust. The emotional mind says, I can't win flips. Adaptive confidence says, the shove was correct. You made the plumb decision given position, stack depth, and range advantage. The loss changes nothing about your skill. Professionals center their self-belief on process integrity, rather than short-term validation. Mathematically, adaptive confidence connects to expected value. You understand that EV realization unfolds over thousands of trials, not individual hands. When variance disrupts short-term outcomes, confidence must remain tethered to statistical truth, not immediate result. A second example illustrates how professionals adjust confidence during live volatility. You hold king-queen of spades on a jack-10-3 flop, with 2 spades. You have open-ended straight and flush draws, massive equity. You bet, get raised, and call. The turn blanks. Your opponent overbets. This is where insecurity often distorts logic. Many players panic. They must have it. Professionals breathe, recall math. With so many outs, your call remains profitable, even if behind. The river misses, you lose. Confidence, however, stays intact. You played correctly. Variance spoke. Adaptive confidence also means listening to feedback. When repeated review shows a frequency error, perhaps overcalling turns or underbluffing rivers, you adjust calmly. Ego does not resist correction. Professionals hold flexible confidence, not fragile pride. The belief is, I am strong enough to improve. Emotionally, this type of confidence feels quiet. It is not the loud certainty of bravado, but the calm assurance of structure. Professionals walk into the card room aware that luck may punish them tonight, and it doesn't matter. Their preparation guarantees clarity even through variance. Another form of adaptive confidence appears when environments change. Suppose you've built your strategy around online play and now transition to live tournaments. Timing tells, stack depth, and pace differ dramatically. The professional accepts temporary discomfort, adapting through observation rather than fear. Confidence here means trusting adaptability itself, the ability to rebuild understanding through logic. This flexibility also applies within sessions. After losing several medium pots, emotional confidence wavers. You begin to question reads, hesitate in marginal spots. The professional restores rhythm through action, smaller pots, simpler lines, renewed focus on fundamentals. Each correct, unremarkable decision rebuilds stability. Confidence grows again through repetition, not recovery. Mathematically, this mirrors bankroll management. You never overinvest one hand's emotional capital into your entire mental balance. Adaptive confidence preserves consistency by distributing trust across volume, many hands, many sessions. Professionals cultivate this resilience off the table through study routines and review. By understanding variance mathematically, they protect self-esteem emotionally. They know that losing streaks are not evidence of decay, but expressions of randomness. the structure remains sound. Adaptive confidence is not denial of weakness, it is strength built on transparency. You trust your skill while acknowledging imperfection. Each hand, win or lose, feeds calibration, proof that confidence must adjust constantly, like balance in motion. In poker, static confidence cracks under variance. Adaptive confidence bends and returns. It breathes with probability, anchored in reason. Professionals carry it like rhythm, steady through both silence and storm. You cannot control outcomes, but you can control belief in your process. When that belief adapts as easily as your strategy, you become unshakable, not because you always win, but because you always continue correctly. Chapter 19: Quantifying Uncertainty. Uncertainty cannot be removed from poker, but it can be measured. Quantifying uncertainty means assigning proportion to doubt, turning confusion into estimation. Professionals do not ask, "What do they have?" They ask, "How often do they have it?" The difference between the two questions is the foundation of clarity. Quantification begins with observation. Every action pre-flop raise, turn, check, river over bet, carries statistical weight. Over time, these actions reveal frequencies that can be modeled. Professionals internalize these frequencies so deeply that estimation becomes instinct. Imagine holding ace-10 of diamonds in the big blind. The cutoff raises, and you call. The flop comes king 5-2 with one diamond. You check, they bet half pot. You call. At this moment, uncertainty surrounds both sides. You don't know whether they hold a strong king, a weak ace, or a bluff. But you can quantify. You recall that this opponent continuation bets 70% of flops wide, but not reckless. That frequency means their range contains many unpaired hands. Your call is not guesswork, it's grounded in ratio. The turn brings 8 of hearts. They check. This lowers their weighted probability of top pair hands and increases bluff density. You bet, half pot, targeting that imbalance. They fold. You didn't need certainty, only proportion. You acted logically, based on statistical expectation rather than emotional instinct. Mathematically, quantifying uncertainty merges probability with logic. Each hand's unknowns become percentage estimates, not mysteries. When an opponent 3-bets from the small blind, you assign them a 12–15% range. When they check-raise a dry flop, you estimate that only half of those combinations are for value. These numerical frameworks replace fear with structure. A deeper example: you hold pocket nines in a cash game. A tight player opens from early position, and you call from the button. The flop comes Jack 7-4 rainbow. They bet large. You know from review that this player continuation bets only 45% of the time on high-card flops. That low percentage means their range skews towards strong hands, overpairs, top pairs, sets. You fold immediately, confident not in certainty, but in proportion. You might have folded the best hand occasionally, but your frequency discipline protects long-term equity. Professionals accept this trade because measured loss today prevents chaos tomorrow. Emotionally, quantifying uncertainty replaces anxiety with process. When you measure doubt, it stops feeling infinite. A call that wins 40% of the time is not guess, it's calculated risk. Professionals embrace this ratio even when it leads to temporary losses. Variance becomes tolerable once it's quantified. A losing stretch is no longer bad luck, it's statistical deviation. If you know your expected win rate is 5 big blinds per 100 hands, a 10,000 hand downswing no longer feels personal. It's mathematics in motion. Professionals detach emotion through comprehension. Quantification also applies dynamically mid-hand. Suppose you hold Queen 9 of spades on the button. The big blind calls your raise. The flop comes 9-6-5 with 2 hearts. They lead pot. The line seems strong, but you estimate that this player donk leads 25% of the time, often with draws or medium pairs. Against that distribution, your top pair wins more than half the time. You call. The turn brings Jack of clubs. They check. You check behind, preserving pot control. The river is 2 of hearts. They bet 1/3 pot. You call again and beat 8-6 suited. Each action was guided not by certainty, but by measured probability. Off the table, professionals refine this skill through analysis. They review hands with solvers or tracking data, comparing subjective estimates to objective truth. Over time, their intuitive estimates align more closely with reality. Quantifying uncertainty transforms chaos into rhythm. Instead of fearing the unknown, you weigh it. Instead of guessing, you measure. Each estimate builds confidence. Each ratio restores control. Poker will always contain randomness. The professional accepts this, but never lets it remain vague. In their mind, even the unknown has numbers, and those numbers keep them calm when others panic. Clarity, after all, is not the absence of uncertainty. It is the ability to measure it precisely enough to act without fear. Chapter 20: Decision Trees and Information Flow. Every poker hand unfolds like a branching tree. Each decision, bet, call, or fold, splits the future into possible outcomes. Professionals navigate this structure through what is called a decision tree, mapping choices and reactions several steps ahead. The strength of this method lies not in predicting exact events, but in understanding how information flows from one branch to the next. A decision tree is not static. It grows as evidence appears. Each action changes available data, narrowing some branches while opening others. Professionals train to visualize these structures instinctively, allowing them to stay balanced even under pressure. Imagine holding ace-queen of spades in the cutoff. The player in middle position opens to 3 big blinds, and you call. The blinds fold. Flop. Queen 9-5 with 2 hearts. Your opponent bets half pot. At this moment, your tree divides into 3 branches. Fold, end the hand, lose a small amount, and gather information about sizing pattern. Call, continue with range protection, allowing opponent to keep betting weaker hands. Raise, polarize your line immediately, forcing them to define their range. Each option carries its own information cost. Folding reveals nothing more. Calling preserves ambiguity. Raising exposes strength, but may extract maximum value or protection. Professionals choose branch not from emotion, but by weighting expected value and information gained. You decide to call. The turn brings 4 of clubs. The opponent checks. That action shifts information flow. You now know they likely lack strong overpairs or sets. The tree collapses. Certain branches close. You bet small, gathering further data. They call. The river is 2 of hearts, completing a potential flush. They lead small. This new input reopens the tree. You must now interpret whether this represents thin value or bluff. Because earlier branches showed passivity, probability favors weak-made hands rather than flushes. You call and win. This process mapping, pruning, re-evaluating is the foundation of structured decision-making. Mathematically, decision trees represent conditional probability chains. Each branch contains outcomes weighted by likelihood and payoff. Professionals do not attempt to compute every number. They focus on proportion. They visualize broad outcomes. If I bet, I win the pot this often and lose this often. The mind becomes simulator, not calculator. A second example illustrates how decision trees guide defense. You hold pocket jacks in the big blind. The button raises, you call. Flop, King Jack 4 rainbow. You check. They bet small. You call. Turn 10 of hearts. You check again. They bet large. Here, you map the tree forward. Raising isolates you against stronger holdings. Calling retains weaker value and controls pot. Folding surrenders too much equity. The call branch remains optimal. River, 8 of clubs. They shove. The tree now splits again, call or fold. You recall earlier lines, large turn bet plus river shove, often polarizes to value or misdraw. Because front door flushes never arrived, some bluffs remain. You call, winning against ace-queen. Even if you had lost, the decision's integrity would remain. Each branch was reasoned through structure, not emotion. Emotionally, decision trees calm the mind. When you view poker as chain of conditional steps, one decision at a time, complexity becomes manageable. You never need to solve the whole tree, only the current branch. Professionals stay present within process, not paralyzed by scale. Off the table, studying decision trees through solver tools or hand mapping builds pattern recognition. Over time, these patterns compress into instinct. The professional sees the tree instantly, like reading a familiar map. Information flow connects directly to composure. Every action sends data, every pause receives it. Professionals learn to exchange this information efficiently, revealing little while extracting much. They understand that control of information, when to give it, when to collect it, is the heartbeat of poker logic. Decision trees turn chaos into order. Each hand becomes a sequence of branches guided by ratio, logic, and rhythm. Professionals move through these paths smoothly, pruning emotion and leaving only structure. Poker rewards those who can see not just the next move, but the system of movement itself. The professional does not wander through the forest of decisions. They navigate it, calmly, one branch at a time. Chapter 21. The Bayesian Loop. In poker, information is always moving. Every action you see, every bet, check or pause, reshapes what you believe about the hand. Professionals manage this process through something called the Bayesian loop. It's a continuous cycle of updating your understanding as new evidence appears. It's not a single calculation. It's an ongoing dialogue between logic and observation. The loop starts with a prior, your first assumption about an opponent's range or style. As the hand plays out, each action becomes new evidence. You adjust your belief and form what's called a posterior, a refined estimate. Then, when the next card hits, the process begins again. The best players repeat this loop in real time until their decision feels clear. Picture this: You're holding ace-queen of hearts in the cutoff seat. A player in middle position raises, and you call. The flop comes king, 10, 4, with 2 clubs. Your opponent makes a small continuation bet. Your prior says they raise with strong hands, big aces, pairs, and Broadway cards, and they continuation bet around 70% of the time. The small bet supports a wide range. It could be weak, or just part of their usual pattern. You call with your open-ended straight draw and backdoor flush potential. The turn is the 3 of diamonds. They check. That new evidence changes things. Many players with strong kings or overpairs would keep betting. The check lowers that probability and increases the chance they have ace-high or a weak pair. You bet 2/3 of the pot. They call. Now the data refines again. Maybe middle pair, maybe a stubborn ace-high hand. The river brings the jack of hearts, completing your straight. They check once more. You bet big for value, and they fold. Each action loops back into the process. Prior, evidence, posterior, until the hand's story naturally reaches its end. Mathematically, the Bayesian loop means this: your new belief equals your old belief, multiplied by the strength of the new evidence. Professionals don't crunch those numbers in real time, they internalize the relationships. Strong evidence, like a large polarized bet, changes beliefs sharply. Weak evidence, like a routine continuation bet, adjusts them only a little. Here's another example, under pressure. You hold pocket nines on the button. The hijack raises, and you call. The flop is 8, 6, 3 rainbow. They bet half the pot. Your prior says they raise with overpairs, top pairs, and some bluffs. The small bet fits that whole range, so you make no big update and call. The turn is the ace of diamonds. They check. That contradicts a strong range. Most overpairs would bet again. The check strengthens the idea they have a weak showdown hand. You bet small. They call. That new evidence adds back some medium-strength hands like 8s or 9s. The river is the king of clubs. They check again. You check back. They show Queen 8 suited. Your entire process, prior evidence and updates, stayed consistent. The pot wasn't large, but the logic was flawless. Emotionally, the Bayesian loop keeps you calm. You don't have to know everything, just enough to update correctly. When something unexpected happens, see it as new data, not a mistake. That mindset turns confusion into curiosity and keeps your emotions steady. The loop also prevents anchoring bias. Many players cling to early labels, calling someone tight, loose, or honest. Professionals keep beliefs fluid. If a so-called tight player bluffs twice in a row, they update. They don't force the evidence to fit the story. In live poker, the Bayesian loop includes physical tells too. A nervous glance, hesitation in moving chips, or an overly rehearsed posture, all of it becomes new evidence. Professionals log those moments quietly, updating their model while staying expressionless. Off the table, they train by reviewing hands one street at a time, noting how each action should have changed their belief. With repetition, that rhythm becomes automatic, the mind constantly balancing what it thought before with what it just learned. The Bayesian loop turns instinct into structured thinking. It makes every observation meaningful and every decision self-correcting. Professionals don't fear new information, they depend on it. Poker rewards adaptability. The players who win most are not those who guess right once, but those who keep updating every time. Chapter 22. Expected Value in Imperfect Systems. Expected value is the compass of poker. It shows the average return of a decision if it were repeated forever. Professionals live by this principle, but they also understand something deeper. Real poker is messy. Human behavior, fatigue, and incomplete information distort the math. True mastery comes not from perfection, but from staying pointed in the right direction despite the noise. Every decision you make carries an expected value, positive, negative, or neutral. Positive expected value choices earn profit over time, even when they lose today. Negative expected value choices lose money in the long run, even if they happen to win right now. Professionals separate outcome from process. Their satisfaction comes from making the correct choice, not from how many chips they collect afterward. Picture a hand where you hold King Jack of Hearts on the button. A player in middle position raises to 3 big blinds, and you call. The flop comes Jack, 7, 5, with 2 clubs. Your opponent bets half the pot. You call. The turn brings the Queen of Diamonds. They check. You bet half the pot, and they call. The river is the 2 of Spades. They check again. You check back. You win the showdown against 10-9 suited. The hand wasn't dramatic, it was balanced. Your flop call protected your range. Your turn, bet earned thin value. Your river check avoided over-aggression. Each choice carried modest but positive expected value. It didn't feel exciting, but it served your long-term goal exactly. Now consider a tougher spot. You hold pocket 4s in a tournament with high blinds. A short stack moves all in for 8 big blinds. A medium stack reshoves for 20. You have 30 behind. You call, correctly reasoning that both players might hold overcards. Your pair has about 30% equity against their combined ranges. The call is positive, expected value. The board runs out, ace, king, queen, and you lose. The math was right, but the result hurts. Professionals accept this gap between truth and feeling. Expected value is reality that variance tries to disguise. In pure math, expected value equals the chance of winning multiplied by the amount you win, minus the chance of losing multiplied by the amount you lose. But poker rarely matches the neat formula. Opponents make mistakes. Humans misread frequencies. So professionals simplify. They label situations by direction instead of precision, clearly positive, marginal, or clearly negative. This mindset keeps them steady through fatigue and uncertainty. Here's another hand that shows this thinking. You hold ace-9 of spades on a 10-6-2 board. An unpredictable opponent bets the full pot. Your pot odds require 40% equity to call, but based on their behavior, you estimate only 35. Slightly negative. You fold. An orbit later, a similar situation arises. This time, your estimate is above the threshold. You call and win. Both decisions were right, because both followed expected value, not emotion. Expected value also guides how professionals spend their mental energy. They study where the payoff per effort is highest. Working on pre-flop ranges yields more value than obsessing over rare river spots. The concept of expected value applies not only to hands, but to time and focus themselves. Emotionally, this discipline protects against variance. When you see every hand as one moment in a long sequence, losses lose their sting. A bad beat becomes statistical, not personal. Professionals think in volume. They judge themselves not by a single session, but by the pattern of correct decisions across thousands. Expected value thinking also teaches humility. Even perfect logic carries uncertainty. The math gives expectation, not guarantee. Professionals accept that and keep trusting their process. Away from the table, they review results with this same lens, checking whether outcomes align with expectation and noticing when emotion pushed them off course. That reflection keeps their internal compass aligned. Expected value is more than a formula. It's a worldview. It reminds us that within poker's chaos, there is order. Each correct decision, repeated patiently, builds quiet progress. In an imperfect system, professionals don't chase perfection. They chase proportion, making enough good choices for probability to take care of the rest. Over time, math rewards discipline, and variance fades into background noise. Chapter 23: The Psychology of Loss Aversion. Loss aversion is the tendency to fear losing more than we value winning. In psychology, it's measured as roughly a 2-to-1 ratio. Losing $1 hurts about twice as much as winning one feels good. In poker, this imbalance distorts logic. Professionals learn to recognize and neutralize it, understanding that avoiding discomfort often costs more than variance ever could. Loss aversion reveals itself in subtle ways. Players fold too quickly in marginal spots, avoid thin value bets, or hesitate to call profitable shoves because they imagine regret before chips move. This mental protection feels safe, but over time it bleeds expected value. Professionals overcome this bias not by suppressing fear, but by reframing it. Losing correctly is success. Only irrational loss is failure. Imagine a common hand. You hold ace-queen offsuit in the big blind. The button opens, and you 3-bet. They call. Flop. Queen 10-6, with 2 clubs. You continuation bet small. They call. Turn. 3 of hearts. You bet again. 2/3 pot. They call once more. River. Jack of clubs. The backdoor flush completes. You check. They shove. The pot is large. Emotion surges. Fear of losing overwhelms logic. Loss aversion whispers, "You'll look foolish if they have it." Professionals pause. They separate math from emotion. The flush completes, but so does straight. Their bluff ratio remains possible. Pot odds demand a call, roughly 33% of the time. You recall this opponent's tendency to overbluff missed draws. You call. They show ace-10, a weaker pair. The logic wins because fear did not. Mathematically, loss aversion skews frequencies. Folding more than equilibrium reduces defense percentage, allowing opponents to exploit your passivity. Over time, small underdefenses compound into major EV loss. Professionals correct by focusing on ratio rather than outcome. The correct call remains correct, even when it loses a third of the time. Another example illustrates the opposite case. You hold pocket nines on a king 8-5 flop. You bet, and your opponent calls. The turn brings ace of hearts. You check, they bet large. Fear of losing tempts you to see one more card, but logic recognizes domination. Folding is correct. Loss aversion can also appear as pride, calling just to avoid feeling outplayed. Professionals detach ego from defense. They fold calmly when math says fold, not because they fear losing, but because they respect proportion. Emotionally, loss aversion stems from identity. Many players attach self-worth to winning hands. When chips vanish, ego feels diminished. Professionals separate the two. They see poker as a sequence of decisions, not personal judgment. Losses are statistical events, not reflections of ability. To retrain the mind, professionals use perspective. They review hands by category, positive EV decisions that lost and negative EV decisions that won. Over time, this catalog proves that outcome variance is irrelevant to skill measurement. The discomfort of losing fades when logic becomes habit. Another practical tool is exposure. Professionals intentionally analyze their biggest losing pots, not to dwell on pain but to normalize it. The brain learns that reviewing loss is safe, reducing fear's future power. Loss aversion also influences bankroll management. Players who fear loss too deeply underplay stakes, stunting growth. Those who ignore it entirely overextend and collapse under pressure. The professional finds balance, playing within comfort, but stretching enough to grow tolerance. Mathematically, variance demands exposure. To realize long-term edge, you must endure short-term risk. The avoidance of temporary loss guarantees permanent stagnation. Emotionally, the antidote to loss aversion is curiosity. Instead of asking, "What if I lose?" professionals ask, "What can I learn?" The shift transforms fear into engagement. In poker, loss is not failure, it is ingredient. Professionals accept its inevitability and treat it like variance in data, not threat to identity. They know that loss aversion blinds logic, while clarity invites growth. The strongest players don't chase wins, they chase correct decisions. Over time, that pursuit converts every rational loss into quiet profit. Chapter 24. The Value of Indifference. In poker, indifference is power. It means reaching a point where your opponent's choices call or fold, bet or check, no longer change your expected value. At equilibrium, your strategy makes them indifferent. The professional's goal is not domination but balance, forcing opponents into decisions where every option feels equally uncomfortable. Indifference is both mathematical and emotional. Mathematically, it describes mixed strategies, betting and checking the right hands at precise ratios, so no counter-strategy can exploit you. Emotionally, it means detachment from results. You neither fear being called nor crave being paid. You act from proportion, not reaction. Imagine holding ace-jack of spades on the button. The cutoff opens, you call. Flop, king 10-4 rainbow. They continuation bet, half pot. You have an open-ended straight draw. You raise small half their bet size. This play folds out weak air, extracts value from draws, and balances future bluffs. If they call, your hand still retains equity. Turn, 7 of diamonds. They check. You check behind, maintaining range balance. River, queen of clubs. The straight completes. They check again. You bet 2/3 pot, targeting pairs and 2 pairs. In this sequence, every choice reflected equilibrium. Your flop raise wasn't pure bluff. It was designed to keep opponents indifferent between folding and continuing. When opponents cannot exploit your frequency, your long-term expectation stabilizes. Mathematically, indifference is the heart of game theory. For every value bet, there must exist proportional bluff. If you bluff too little, opponents fold too little. If you bluff too much, they call too much. Professionals find the ratio where those reactions lose meaning. That is indifference in action. Another example demonstrates defensive equilibrium. You hold pocket eights in the big blind. The button raises, you call. Flop, Queen 9-5, with 2 spades. You check, they continuation bet, 2/3 pot. If you fold too often, they profit automatically. To defend correctly, you must continue with enough combinations, pairs, draws, and some ace highs, to make their bluffing frequency neutral. You call, even if uncertain, because your presence in the pot protects your range. Turn, 3 of clubs. They check. You bet small. This balanced aggression flips the dynamic. They now face indifference. If they fold too much, they lose to your bluffs. If they call too wide, they lose to your value. Over time, maintaining these ratios prevents exploitation and maximizes long-term value. Emotionally, indifference is liberation. Many players attach identity to outcome, relief when called correctly, frustration when bluffed. Professionals detach completely. They recognize that equilibrium decisions succeed by design, not by validation. A bluff caught occasionally is evidence of correct frequency, not failure. Indifference also shapes rhythm. Professionals make decisions without hesitation or visible relief. Their behavior mirrors balance. They do not celebrate winning pots or lament losing them. This steadiness protects psychological equilibrium, which mirrors strategic equilibrium. Another subtle form of indifference lies in hand selection. Suppose you have Jack 9 suited on the cutoff and face an early position raise. The hand sits at edge of calling range, profitable sometimes, marginal often. Professionals randomize here, mixing calls and folds at roughly equal rates. This randomness creates practical indifference. Opponents cannot predict behavior, keeping balance intact. Mathematically, these mixed strategies guarantee stability. If opponents knew your hand always folded or always called, they could exploit. By randomizing, you remove informational leverage. The professional uses equilibrium not to confuse others, but to remain unexploitable. Off the table, indifference extends to results. Professionals analyze mistakes with calm detachment. They care deeply about accuracy, not emotion. When review shows an error, they adjust quietly, no self-criticism, no pride. Each correction preserves structure. The emotional value of indifference is freedom. When you accept that some outcomes are neutral by design, you stop chasing perfection. Each correct action, whether profitable today or not, reinforces balance. Poker rewards proportion. Indifference is the point where logic and emotion align, where you play not to win every hand, but to remain unexploitable forever. The professional understands. Peace at the table comes not from control, but from equilibrium. When you can act without need for reassurance, you've reached the rarest advantage of all, calm neutrality inside perpetual uncertainty. Chapter 25. Translating Theory into Instinct. Theory builds understanding. Instinct builds execution. The strongest poker players live in the space between the two. They study deeply, then practice until knowledge becomes reflex, so that in the moment of pressure, logic flows without conscious strain. Translating theory into instinct is the final evolution of a disciplined player. At first, theory feels abstract. You study solver outputs, equity charts, and optimal frequencies. Every number makes sense in isolation, but feels heavy at the table. Professionals bridge that gap through repetition. They practice common situations, 3-bet pots, continuation bet defenses, blind versus blind play, until each line becomes rhythm. The goal is not memorization but internalization. Imagine a simple pre-flop scenario. You hold ace-5 suited in the small blind. The button opens to 2.5 big blinds. A theoretical chart says 3-bet, this hand 50% of the time, call 50%. The number itself is meaningless until it becomes feel. After thousands of hands, your intuition recognizes conditions, stack depth, opponent type, position dynamic, and executes that mix automatically. You no longer recall data, you recall proportion. This conversion process mirrors how athletes train. The first stage is mechanical, correct but slow. The second is rhythmic, consistent under low stress. The third is fluid, instinctive even under pressure. Professionals reach this final stage by building layers of structure that free cognition for higher-level reads. Consider a post-flop example. You defend the big blind with king-9 of hearts against a cutoff raise. Flop, 9-6-2 rainbow. You check, they continuation, bet 1/3 pot. The theory says, defend here nearly always. Your top pair dominates weaker value and bluffs. After enough practice, you no longer calculate. The moment you see board texture and position, your brain triggers automatic call. This is instinct born from theory. Turn, queen of spades. They bet again, larger. Now the hand shifts into semi-automatic logic. You recall that turn-over cards favor the aggressor. You call less often, mixing folds with some bluff catches. The decision happens naturally because the underlying rule is embedded in memory. Translating theory into instinct does not mean abandoning thought, it means reducing mental friction. Professionals think less during execution because they already thought more during study. Each principle, bet sizing, range balance, bluff frequency, was once explicit. Now it's implicit, leaving space for perception. Mathematically, this reduces cognitive load. Conscious calculation is limited to a few operations per second, but subconscious pattern recognition processes thousands. By shifting knowledge into automatic form, you act faster and remain calm under pressure. Another example shows the emotional side. You hold queen-10 of clubs in the cutoff. The small blind 3 bets you call. Flop king-9-5 with 2 clubs. They continuation bet large. Instinct triggers, strong draw, plus position equals profitable call. No math required. The instinct is not guess. It's the sum of years of learned equity awareness. The turn brings 4 of diamonds. They check. You bet 2/3 pot. The sizing flows naturally. You've internalized that larger bet's pressure-capped ranges. The river blanks. You check behind and lose to aces, and yet every action was correct. Instinct functioned flawlessly. Emotionally, instinct protects focus. Thinking consciously about every ratio drains energy. Professionals rely on automatic recall, so their composure never fractures during long sessions. The more theory absorbed, the more mental freedom gained. Off the table, translation happens through deliberate drills. Reviewing solver outputs, replaying hands, and shadow commentating past sessions all reinforce neural pathways. Over time, theoretical logic migrates from intellect to intuition. Professionals also remain humble about instinct's limits. Automatic responses can drift, if not recalibrated. Regular study resets accuracy, keeping intuition aligned with modern theory. In the end, instinct is simply remembered, discipline. Each automatic reaction was once a conscious effort repeated correctly. The professional trusts that process. They study deeply, execute smoothly, and adjust calmly. When theory becomes instinct, poker slows down. Chaos feels organized. Every action flows from structure without strain. The professional no longer thinks about what to do. They simply do it, perfectly, as if logic itself has learned to breathe. Chapter 26. Lesson Recap. Poker is a game built on incomplete information. Every choice we make balances logic against uncertainty. This lesson explored that balance, how professionals think clearly within chaos, applying structure without losing intuition. Throughout these chapters, we learned that certainty is not required for accuracy. Each decision carries unknowns, but disciplined reasoning turns those unknowns into proportion. Bayesian thinking, expected value, and equilibrium provided mathematical anchors. From them we built systems to interpret risk through calm logic instead of fear. We examined how composure influences clarity. Concepts like adaptive confidence, emotional calibration, and patience revealed that decision-making begins long before the hand starts. Professionals remain stable because they treat uncertainty not as threat, but as data. Each outcome, win or loss, becomes feedback for refinement. We saw that balance and exploitation coexist as part of the same structure. A strong player adapts when weakness appears, then returns to equilibrium when the edge fades. This rhythm attack, adjust, stabilize, defines mastery more than any single strategy. Emotionally, the lesson reminded us that thought must remain fluid. Tactical flexibility, disciplined folding, and defensive structure all rely on the same mental foundation, patience under pressure. Professionals trust the process, knowing that variance is temporary and logic is permanent. In the end, decision-making under uncertainty is not about predicting the future. It is about staying composed enough to navigate it. Poker rewards those who think proportionally, who respond to volatility with clarity, and who accept that imperfection is part of the system. The professional learns to see uncertainty as opportunity. Within it lies every edge, every lesson, and every quiet moment where logic and instinct finally align.